parents who have adopted an older child, 5 and up. How's it gone for you? Do you regret it? Or would you recommend other parents considering adoption to look into an older child as well? My story is a bit different. I was coaching a soccer team and had a kid in the foster program on the team. He was 13. Over the course of the season, my wife and I really got to know him and saw how crappy his foster parents were. At the end of the season, we asked him if he wanted to come live with us instead. It's been 9 years since then. We had rough patches, but for us, it was easy. We were still a young couple, 24 and 27, but his social worker arranged continued funding for us, which eliminated any financial burden. It was an easy decision for us, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. We've had 4 of his other biological siblings live with us at one time or another as they've aged out of foster care. They all have their own unique problems, but all kids do. His 18-year-old sister asked to come quarantine with us, so we've got her staying here now. His brothers and sister are all just extra family, and our biological little ones, 3 and 5, call them all brother and sister. He's 22 now and almost done with college and hopes to be a police officer. Sadly, my wife and I will be moving out of state soon and we'll miss him like crazy, but we know we've prepared him for life outside of our home. We'll still be there for him, of course, but we're excited to see him thrive independently. His girlfriend of 4 years is pushing him to move to our new state once they both finish school, so they may still be back near us soon enough. Story 2. My spouse and I did something similar. We both worked in the system in California doing different jobs. My job was being the administrator for 3 group homes, 2 of which were short-term placements for kids who had just been removed from their homes for abuse or neglect. Our agency contracted with the county, but was based out of a different state. We moved out to California to do very specific jobs at the request of our administrative headquarters where we were working previously. During our time in California, our agency decided to close our office in a number of states, including California. We had grown to love living there, so when we were offered promotions back at our headquarters, we told the agency that we would consider it. One thing that I couldn't get off my mind is that we had a sibling set of 4 who were going to be split up into foster care, because at the time there weren't any 4-bed homes open. After a lot of thought, my wife and I turned down the promotions, found new jobs, got our foster license, moved, sold a car and replaced it with a van, all within 90 days. The kids moved in on the 87th day after we announced our closure. I want to preface the rest of this story with the following. Foster care is not designed for people who are looking to adopt cheaply. It is designed to aid in family reunification. We fostered our kids, and it was difficult because we had kids aged 5, 6, 11, and 13, all of whom bore their trauma differently. After about 6 months, we were asked if we would be willing to adopt. We went into fostering having decided that we would be open to the idea, but it was not our priority. We told the kids, you have a place here as long as you need it, even if that ends up being forever. To make a long and difficult story short, our adoption was finalized about a year later. Adoption is hard for everyone. I'm a highly trained professional who still works in the system, albeit in a much different capacity, and it can be a challenge every day. My wife is also a highly trained professional, and I know it stretches her as well. Most kids, even those who are adopted at birth, often exhibit signs of trauma. Kids who are adopted out of foster care almost always do. Often that trauma looks like bad behavior, but if you address it with punishment, you'll only get more of the same, because you're not addressing the underlying issue. To truly parent in a trauma-informed way requires tons of patience, knowledge, and most of all, empathy. I currently work for an agency that, among other things, works with transitional age youth. These are kids between 16 and 22 that are either living independently through an SILP, live in an independent living program, or are on their own but still technically a ward of the court. These kids have had multiple failed foster placements and or failed adoptions. Their stories are heartbreaking because the adults in their lives who had good intentions failed them. Good intentions aren't enough. To make foster care or adoption work, you have to be prepared to give a lot, even when you feel like you can't give any more, just like you would do for a biological child. Our kids are doing well, but we've had a lot of very high points punctuated with some very, very, very low points, because our kids are just now starting to really work through their trauma. We can cycle through feeling elated, despondent, angry, aggravated, and back to elated all within a few hours' time with each kid. But you know what? That's pretty normal for most parents. Keeping a healthy perspective can be difficult at times. Just 1 or 2 children out of foster care would be tough for any parent. 4 at a time, yeah, it's a good thing that OP and his wife are trained professionals. That seems, I don't know, man, just really hard. But an incredibly amazing and important thing to do as well. Because if they weren't going to do it, I don't know of many other people who would be up to the task. So good on them. I hope those kids are living amazing lives. Story 3. I adopted a 15-year-old. He was hell on wheels and made a lot of really poor choices. Now he's 20, and I'm so proud of the man he became. It was a horrible time trying to get him to understand that abuse isn't love, and that we wanted the best for him. But he's doing great now and is working really hard to create a loving family of his own. Do I suggest adopting adopting older kids? Hell yes. The biggest reason is because I grew up in foster care. All I wanted was my own family. It's hard, it's taxing, and you have a lot of rewiring to do to treat their hurts and make them better. But every minute is so worth it. Story 4. Long story inbound. I'm gonna cut it down as much as I can. My wife and I are a little older, so when we decided to adopt, we opted for an older child for a host of reasons. One being it made more sense financially for us. Healthy infant adoptions are crazy expensive for average people like us, plus the long waits, etc. And also because our hearts went out for older children whom society generally wants to look over and forget. These kids need a home too. We chose to adopt from the foster care system. This meant taking the same set of classes as standard aspiring foster parents. So even though we had no intention of becoming actual foster parents, we learned what they learn and became legitimate foster parents. We took in a troubled 13-year-old. I won't tell her personal story of how she got into the system, except to say it was not as one might expect. We stuck through it with her. There were lots of twists and turns in her story, and we found out the hard way that she was not, in fact, clear for adoption months into the process. So we became what we wanted to avoid: foster parents instead of adoptive parents. I'll never forget during one of the regularly scheduled court appearances we were obligated to go to, of having the court workers review her story to the court and later having random people sob in the back from listening to it, and telling us, "We will pray for you." She was angry at the world for her situation, angry at her biological mom for abandoning her, angry at the system for forgetting her for so many years. She lashed out at us many times as well, thinking we would just give up on her. I'll never forget her slamming the door to her room and screaming at my wife, "I hate you," over and over, while my wife was barely holding it together and saying, "I love you anyway," each time. My wife and I had moments of despair. When one of us would grow weak and say we couldn't do this anymore, and maybe we should consider giving up, the other would remind us, well, what would we do in this situation if she were our child? And we would nod and press on. One day, about a year and a half in, this child turned to me while I was driving her somewhere and said, "I don't want to go back to my biological mom. I want you. I want you to be my dad." And I, a grown-ass man, broke down and wept. The adoption went final when she was 15 years old. Yes, it was that long of a process. But the actual adoption took all of 5 minutes in a judge's chamber, for which this girl quipped, "That's it? Just the stroke of a pen? Hell, I would have lent you a pen years ago." People who didn't know us back then are honestly surprised to learn she was adopted. She's an honor graduate from high school now, and is planning to attend college in the fall for nursing. We couldn't be more proud of this child, our daughter. I'm just going to apologize to the editor really quick, just publicly, because they're going to have to go through and edit out every time I broke during this story. Because, I don't know, it was a little emotional, to be honest. It's definitely a beautiful story about the possible wonders of the foster care and adoption systems. Great work, OP. You gave this child a chance she may not have had otherwise. Story 5. We adopted our eldest daughter at 10. We actually adopted her baby half-sister first. After the mom met us, since we were doing this via foster care, she asked if we would adopt her other daughter too. She had been in and out of foster care most of her life, and her biological mom selflessly made the decision to let her go for stability and safety. We definitely weren't planning to adopt another child. We already had a 6-year-old biological child. But after meeting the 10-year-old, we knew we would want her to be part of our family. It's been 16 years, and it definitely hasn't always been easy, but we have no regrets. We love our daughter like our own. She was challenging to raise the first few years, definitely had some trust issues with us, and some deep-seated abandonment issues. Family therapy helped. Every once in a while, like once every few years or so, these issues resurface. She still struggles with depression and anxiety. I'd be lying if I said this doesn't worry me. It does, but she does seem to have a handle on it. She's always been incredibly smart and talented. She just finished her master's, has had a successful career thus far, and she's engaged to a wonderful man. They were supposed to get married this summer, and now we aren't sure thanks COVID. It's almost odd that she has really excelled in everything she's ever tried. She thinks it's mostly due to good luck. We call her, half-jokingly, our achiever. Some of her success was due to our parenting, I'm sure, but most of it is just her. Just the way she's wired. I'm proud to be her mom. Story 6. We adopted a 15-year-old girl, after raising 3 biological kids to adulthood. It's been good, but quite different from what we expected. 15-year-olds are not fully formed, but almost. She is a nice, smart kid, but also got pregnant, hid it for 4 months, and had a beautiful baby. We expected her to finish high school and hold down a part-time job and save some money, as she would need it to become independent after graduation, which was her goal. She moved 1,000 miles away, took up with kind of a rough crowd, was immersed in a druggy, thiefy homeless group that made her fear that her son would end up removed and back in the foster care system. For now, the baby is with us. Almost 2 babies are a lot of work, but also a lot of joy and laughter. We're about 60. Occasionally, I think, oh, this isn't what we signed up for. But in reality, it is exactly what we signed up for. Most folks, when they have a kid or multiple kids, have a bunch of expectations. Part of what makes it interesting is that the kids come with their own personalities, software, journeys, whatever you want to call it. Can make for a wild, interesting 20 years. Story 7. Throwaway account because this is personal. I've been a foster parent for 4 years, have fostered birth to 15, about 20 kids total, and I've worked as an advocate for foster/adoptive parents for 2. I adopted my son last year after he had been with me for almost a year in foster care. He was 5, so still pretty young. He's autistic and nonverbal. His mom has severe mental health issues, and he has been homeless his whole life before coming into care. He was wandering the street in a diaper and nothing else in November when he was found by the police. I've never regretted adopting him for a second. He's wonderful. He's ridiculously bright and funny and sweet. I love him more than I knew I could love anyone. We have many difficult days or weeks. I gave up a lot of things to be his dad. I'm only 27. It's hard to find a sitter for him. His daycare keeps him in the baby room. He can't always go out into the store or anywhere loud or crowded, etc. But I adjusted and I don't regret it. From my work side, I can say I've encountered many adoptive parents who regret adopting. Usually these are folks who adopted little ones, like birth to 2. And when those kids start exhibiting big behaviors, having trouble in school, needing psych hospitalization, getting involved with the juvenile justice, that's when they call me and ask how to give them back. Just so you know, there are no give-backs unless you're willing to accept criminal charges. Edit. This isn't true for all places. Some places have civil charges and some have nothing. Anyway, I often see people say they want to foster teens, which is amazing, and I will never get in the way of that because it is so needed. I want those people to talk to people who foster teens before they do it. It's very hard. Not just hard like remodeling your bathroom or getting a work project done. There's no finish line. It is a constant struggle. There are lots of good days and happy times, and it's worth it. But people who talk about their kids going on to law school or even college, in my experience, are the minority. Kids with trauma often need lifelong support. That means when they're 20, 25, you're still lending them money or driving them to rehab or dispensing medication. And if they have kids, they may not be able to parent appropriately without a lot of help. I know a lot of adoptive parents now raising their grandkids as well. Yeah, adopting and then having to raise that kid's kids is unfortunate. Definitely something I can see potential adoptive parents overlooking at first. So it's important to be informed that is a very real possibility. That being said, I hope it doesn't discourage too many people from adopting because these teens do also still need homes. And without the stability and opportunity presented by a good home, their trajectory in life is unfavorable, I think. Story 8. My husband and I adopted my brother's 2 kids at the time, 2M and 6F, and their sister, 4F. Our oldest was violent and abusive to herself and toward me. She never acted out that way around my husband, which always made me feel as though I was doing something wrong. Maybe we weren't a good fit. Maybe I was too young. Maybe she was better off with her foster family. I would spend every night in tears, fearful we were doing more harm than good, because she never acted out that way before adoption. She was reading by 3, eating up chapter books before we could introduce them properly. We thought she was memorizing street names, but nope, she read them faster than we could most times. She was and still is a brilliant young lady that shocks people when she speaks. But those fits. It took our dog almost a year to really trust her. At one point she kicked me so hard in the mouth I thought I lost teeth. Therapy and counseling helped more than I can even say for both of us. Her therapist reminded me that she was hurt by her mother, and never knew her father enough to not trust him. She was throwing knives, metaphorically of course, because she had never really trusted women before. She was wary, and rightfully so. We both worked so hard to develop a healthy relationship, and honestly, we're still putting hours into it. She's almost 10, and honestly, just like me. It's odd. It's like we've always been a family, but it didn't always feel that way. Story 9. I fostered 7 and adopted 2, all girls. I got them between the ages of 12 and 15. I took that age because they were hard to place, and I knew they were coming with loads of issues. My second youngest had been part of an explicit content ring run by her parents. She was my biggest challenge and still is. She is the human embodiment of Eeyore. She made it through college, got her law degree, passed the bar, and self-commits at least once a year. She's schizophrenic and still has ideations. One of my middle girls was severely beaten by alcoholic parents, and she has a slight drinking problem and thinks nothing of swatting her kids. She knows if I see one mark on them or if they say anything, I will take them. The others mostly have self-esteem issues. They're all grown now, and I would do it again. These are my kids, and I love them. I also had one biological daughter and a stepson. The stepson is the only one I regret. It's definitely not for everyone. Story 10. I took guardianship of my son's half-sister when she was 14. Their father, who is not and will never be a part of my son's life, was abusive and tried to touch her once when he was drunk. As a result, she had hyper-intimate tendencies and acted out. Her mother was a pushover who didn't know how to handle her, so she was put into the system. I knew she wasn't a bad kid, so I stepped in and said I would take her. It was rough that first year. She tested the boundaries a lot. until she realized that I wasn't going to give up on her. I think it also helped that her baby brother adored her, and my parents welcomed her with open arms. We found her a good therapist that she clicked with, and that really helped her work through her issues. She finished school with good grades, met her boyfriend who was wonderful with her. She has kids of her own now and is a fantastic mother. Best decision I ever made was taking her in. Story 11. Mine is now 16. I became dad when they were 5. They got drunk tonight on alcohol they snuck out of a locked room in the basement, screamed at their mother and I for 2 hours, ranted at their younger siblings, then we called the police to take them to the hospital for their 10th inpatient psych admission and 4th one this year, past 12 months. Less than a month after being released from the last one. They were such a happy kid, but the last 6 years have been hell. They swing from being a great, smart, funny kid with a bright future to rampaging throughout the house at the drop of a hat. There's definitely a mental health issue, but nothing works, and the swings are getting more and more frequent. I worry for them every single day. I love all of my kids. I also can't wait for this specific one to turn 18, when they announced they're moving to Seattle to live with their boyfriend, because we are just so tired, and it doesn't matter how much therapy we pay for and undergo or how many times they go inpatient. If they'll be happier there, then that's fine by me. Maybe getting out there and failing, God I hope they don't, will make them take recovery and therapy seriously. I'm terrified I'm going to have to bury them, though. It's 4 a.m. I have to open my office in 4 hours, and I'm sitting on the couch waiting for my wife to get home from the hospital. Nothing's changing, and we're all just so tired. Story 12. Adopted a child who was 11 when I was 21. He was my wife's younger cousin, and his household was marred with substance abuse, filth, instability, and mental health issues. I knew it was bad, but didn't know how bad. Took him, 11, and his brother, 14, for a summer once, just to give them a break from what we thought was a dirty house with an overwhelmed parent, until I took them back the week before school started and saw the filth firsthand. The smell, the random people coming in and out, the wreckage we were about to leave them in, the fact that in this time his Xbox and games, I had hand-me-downed him, had been sold along with their TV. The two had one mattress on a floor and the younger one said, "I can't wait for school to start back." And when I asked why, he said, "Because then I get to eat every day like when I'm at your house." I told him, just get back in the car. His mother never even called to ask why he or his brother didn't come home until tax season, to make sure we didn't claim them on our taxes, etc. Never wished him a happy birthday, Christmas, nothing. My wife and I grew up very quickly. We worked hard and got full custody about a year later when he was 12. He grew up healthy and happy, successful with great grades and a good head on his shoulders. His brother, who was 14, lived with us for the first year, then would go back and forth trying to help his mom get her life together before returning again. But for the most part during those years, the younger child we had full custody of, and the older child came and went as he needed. It wasn't until years later when the younger of the two moved out with his friends instead of taking our offer to go to college right after school and began having substance abuse issues of his own that we learned the extent of the abuse he had endured at home for nearly his entire childhood and kept inside. Intimate and physical abuse for years, starting when he was about 5 from his mother's friends and boyfriends, and even a family member due to their pretty terrible situation. It was heartbreaking. He ended up going through a pretty severe addiction period in his early to mid-20s, and regardless of what we've tried and how many small successes we've worked with him to reach, he always ends up in a severe depression and turning back to drugs again. The last time I talked to him about a week ago, I told him I loved him and would help him get into a very nice rehab community when he's ready, and help him get a good job and place for himself, but only when he's ready to be clean. Until then, we simply can't do anything with or for him. That was hard to do. I'm in the second half of my 30s now, have 3 children in grade school who need me like he did then, who also love him. Our oldest looks at him like a big brother, but unfortunately we have to keep our distance, so they don't have to see close up the ugly side of addiction in someone they love. Now that he's an adult in his mid-20s himself making these choices, we can't have any real relationship other than the occasional call or letter when he's done. He loves them too, but he's got some demons that we cannot possibly understand, and until he's ready to get help for them or help for his addiction, we don't have much of a relationship. His brother worked hard and straightened their mother out over the years into a functioning adult, got her life together, a job, a place, everything, and as adults, never left her. In fact, due to him, his brother spent the last year of his teens sharing our household and hers back and forth, which wouldn't have been possible without him. The older brother and her are roommates now, and we're very proud of him for the man he's become, what he's preserved, and the incredible progress he's made with their mother, and how he's stuck by her side now providing as equals. I never realized it, but he and I really grew up together, only being 5 to 6 years apart in age, and we were best friends for years as young adults, even after his younger brother moved out. One of my biggest regrets is somehow letting those days end. He loves his brother too, but his and his mother's relationship with his brother is the same as ours. The delicate balance between helpful/love versus enabling due to understanding the pain he's probably trying to understand/repress. until he's able to beat this. And he will. Nothing is perfect. Just what you make of it, I suppose. But it has highlighted to us how important the early years of a child's development are, and how damaging all forms of abuse can be, regardless how much effort you put in trying to change things afterwards. And also how important it is for a child to have an adult who genuinely cares about them, since sadly, many don't. Would I recommend it? Yes, but be honest with yourself why you're doing it, and know what you're getting into. You're not getting a good/bad kid. You're getting an opportunity to be a good/bad parent. Children this age need you as much as a baby does. They bring happiness the same as a baby does, and also present their own unique challenges the same as parents do, which is what they're getting too, just without knowing. And most importantly, the reason you should be adopting is for them. You get to give your love, time, affection, and a portion of your life and heart too. Would I do it again? Every single time. Doing everything you can to give a child a great life and having them end up making poor decisions for whatever reason later on, that must be heartbreaking for any parent, let alone an adoptive parent. I personally think Opie has a pretty good head on his shoulders about all this, that you can't really help that child until they're ready to be helped at the very least, and also understanding it's not really their fault. There's some deep-seated issues there with abuse of all kinds, and that'll mess someone up pretty bad. Opie seemed very optimistic about his younger son beating this, and I hope he's right, and I hope it happens soon. Best of luck, Opie. Those kids are incredibly lucky to have an adoptive parent like you. Story 13. I became dad to a little girl just after her 2nd birthday, legally stepdad just before her 4th, and divorced her mother just after her 7th. But I remained dad, and I do to this day. She's 21 now. Her mother is a drunk who had 2 more kids later on with an abusive guy, now ex, who's in jail. The whole time, my daughter had me to fall back on. I told her the truth at 15, as I know it, about her biological father, who has never attempted to contact her. He has at least 2, if not 3 other children. If she wanted to seek him out, I told her I would help her. Also that she needed to be aware at any time he or those other siblings could also seek her out. She looked me in the eye and said, "No, you're my dad. That's all I want to know." Story 14. My wife and I adopted an older girl from our state's foster system. The girl was 13 when we adopted her, and we were told she had a rough childhood full of abuse, and she had been diagnosed with a general mood disorder. Little did we know the psychological assessment was done by an unqualified state doctor, and this little girl had severe issues that required more care than my wife and I were prepared for. We spent 5 years dealing with fighting, arguing, runaway attempts, drug use, alcohol abuse, constant emotional manipulation, constant lying, stealing, etc. She was also in constant contact with her schizophrenic birth mother behind our backs. The woman kept feeding our daughter conspiracy theories and lies, and constantly making the situation worse for all of us. We tried the best we could for 5 whole years. Various different therapists, different parenting methods, seeing different doctors, all to no avail. It wasn't until about 5 months before her 18th birthday that we would have to get her committed, and we finally got her a proper diagnosis. She was diagnosed with bipolar and BPD, and we finally had an answer to the years of hell that we all had to go through. We did our research and learned the proper way to parent a child with these conditions, and things began to improve over the last few months she was with us. Unfortunately, on her 18th birthday, though, she bailed, and we haven't seen her since. That was 5 years ago. Story 15. I adopted a 7-year-old from foster care in 2017. It was an absolute failure. My wife pushed me to choose this child even though I didn't feel the sparks everyone talks about when meeting or hearing about their kids. He has a background of being intimately predatory, and it's triggering for me as a survivor of childhood abuse. I separated from my wife in 2018, and we shared custody for about a year. I asked her for a short break, and she took the child and never returned him. I can't say I'm unhappy about her choice. I didn't really fight for her to bring him back. I've seen him only a few times since then. I care for him as a human being and of course wish no harm upon him, but I'm not his parent. It's one of the most difficult things I've been through. As much as I believe these children deserve good and loving homes, people who are not prepared for it and know they aren't, taking a step back and being like, I can't do this, is also super fair. I will say, being married to your wife, OP, does mean you get a say in this as well. You could have just straight up said no to the whole adoption, because as far as I know, it does require 2. At least if you're adopting as a couple, I mean. But I also understand there's probably a lot of pressure on you, and it was a decision you felt like you had to make, maybe. I think you made a mistake there, admittedly. But not knowing all the circumstances, all I can say is it's important that you take care of yourself, too. And although I hope the child is being treated well by your ex, I think it's good that you don't have to deal with that kind of behavior, considering your past especially. Story 16. I'm from the other side of this question. I was adopted when I was 5 by a couple of narcissists that adopted children so they could say they did. I was a pretty screwed up kid even by then. They were obviously told that. Being both master's plus degree teachers, they were determined to fix me. So I got these people in my life that expected adult behavior and decisions from a child. I was slightly physically abused and just wrecked emotionally the entire time. No affection was ever displayed. Their favorite line was, "We put food on the table and a roof over your head. What more could you want?" There was never any type of teaching of life skills like money handling or goal setting. Looking back now, negative feedback was the only way I learned anything. My dad made it clear I would join the army out of high school. I did, and it was the worst thing I could have done as a screwed up young adult. So just consider what your real motivation is behind adopting kids. Are you trying to give them a better life? Or are you just wanting something more complex than your cat to post on Facebook? Story 17. My wife and I adopted a 16-year-old boy over a year ago. We originally went in thinking we were going to adopt much younger, but when we started reviewing profiles, there were a large number of teenagers in the mix. Most people adopting children are looking for the full parental experience. For some, adoption is their only chance at raising a child. So I can kind of understand the desire to adopt a young child. The result is, though, that the older children are skipped over. It's heartbreaking, as many unadopted kids exit the system at 18, and almost all of their supports disappear. We kept running into these profiles and it was impossible to ignore them. We were adopting to expand our family, already having kids of our own, so parenting wasn't new to us. He's been a great addition and has blended really well. Story 18. In my family situation, I wish we hadn't. My father was the baseball coach, and this boy and my brother were friends on the team. This boy was from a terrible family, and was getting into trouble a lot. My father wanted to help. My parents decided that they would foster him and possibly work towards adopting. Well, he was about 4 years older than me, and he started touching me almost immediately. At first, I found it fun. He was cute and the older boy. I'd never had anyone interested in me like that before. But then he started to do things that I didn't understand. I would try to get him to stop, but he would hit me and mentally abuse me. It was awful. I felt like I couldn't say anything because he was terrifying, and I also felt responsible for allowing it to happen and enjoying it at first. He was my first crush and kiss. It was a really confusing time. He ended up spiraling out and became very violent. My parents decided he was becoming too dangerous to be in our home and ended the fostering. They never found out about what he was doing to me until a decade later. So I think each situation is certainly unique. This kid was unfortunately broken and wanted to break everything within his path. If you do decide to adopt and you have other children in your home, make them a part of the decision. Have open communication about what is and what isn't acceptable. My parents had great intentions. I don't blame them in any way, but I'll be damned if I would allow an outside source like that to penetrate my home again. OP here makes a great point. If you already have kids, they should be part of the decision-making process too, because it's affecting their lives maybe even more than it's affecting the parents. And that's with all this abuse aside. Story 19. I took in my now son when he was 8. My daughter, his big sister, a few years later at 14. We went into the situation looking for a newborn, and were asked to respite the boy for a few weeks, just until a bed at the local teen ranch opened up. We've been through tantrums, years of rage, attempts at their own lives, drug troubles, the works. But getting to watch these kids go from psychotic, depressed cast-offs to actual human adults is the proudest accomplishment of my life. She's gone from a self-harming and constantly depressed girl that I wasn't sure would live very long, to a bright and hilarious girl who's preparing for her first semester of college. He's gone through a similarly dramatic change. If you can take that first long period of acting out in drama, then I would strongly recommend it. Now, this is our last story, and I want to leave it on a good note, but I am suspicious of what OP says here. I think there's something to be said about these behaviors not really ever going away for good. Drug troubles, attempts at one's own life, these things don't just go through dramatic changes and get solved. OP, I think, is looking at this a bit naively. Even if they seem gone for now, and maybe they are, they'll crop up again. It's that or they're being repressed or something. It is very rare for people to just get better, especially children. Those thoughts and behaviors came from somewhere and it doesn't go away that easily. So OP, the trials and tribulations aren't over yet. And that's not supposed to be a threat or anything, but I think you can get a little too comfortable when things start going well and you let your guard down. So I would caution people to keep the guard up almost, if that makes sense. I don't know, maybe I'm too pessimistic about it, but from what I know about behavior and psychology, mental health is never over. Anyway, sorry to ruin a potentially good ending, but I wanted to keep it real. Because what's the point of covering serious topics if I'm just gonna gloss over everything and make it sound great and good? I have to give my actual input at some points anyway. For now, though, that is the last story, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.